The transport van pulled up to Ironwood Women's Correctional Facility at 4:47 a.m., 43 minutes before sunrise. Inside, shackled to the bench, Dr. Claire Meadows sat with perfect posture, her hands folded in her lap, her breathing slow and measured. The two guards escorting her had stopped trying to make conversation somewhere around mile marker 94. There was something about her silence that made words feel intrusive. She looked like someone's kind aunt. 52 years old. Silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. The sort of woman you'd expect to see volunteering at a library or teaching piano to neighborhood children. But Officer Sarah Chen had read the file. She knew exactly what Claire Meadows was. And that knowledge made her skin crawl. Processing will take about 2 hours, Chen said as they walked through the intake corridor. Then you'll be assigned to cell block C, general population. You understand what that means? Claire nodded once. Her eyes moved across the facility with the kind of systematic observation that felt clinical. Assessing. Cataloging. Dr. Meadows, Chen continued, her voice dropping lower, I need to be straight with you. Your case made national news. Every inmate in this facility knows who you are and what you did. Some of them have children. Some of them lost people to situations like yours. This is going to be difficult. I understand, Claire replied. Her voice was soft. Educated. The kind of voice that belonged in lecture halls and medical conferences. Thank you for your concern, Officer Chen. I'll be fine. But Chen saw something in Claire's eyes that contradicted her gentle tone. A coldness that existed beneath the surface like ice under still water. And she realized with sudden certainty that Dr. Claire Meadows wasn't concerned about surviving Ironwood. She was concerned about something else entirely. Something that made survival seem trivial by comparison. Because Claire Meadows hadn't been caught. She'd surrendered. After a 15-year career as one of the most respected pediatric surgeons in the country. After saving hundreds of children's lives in operating rooms across 3 hospitals. After building a reputation for medical brilliance and humanitarian compassion. She had walked into a police station and confessed to something that would guarantee she spent the rest of her life behind bars. And somewhere in Ironwood, living in cell block C, was the woman who had destroyed everything Claire had spent her life building. The woman who had taken something irreplaceable. The woman who had no idea that the quiet, gentle doctor being processed through intake was the most dangerous person to ever walk through these gates. The confession had been precise. Clinical. Delivered with the same systematic clarity Claire used when explaining complex surgical procedures to medical students. My name is Dr. Claire Meadows. I am confessing to medical malpractice resulting in the death of a patient. The death was not accidental. It was premeditated and executed with full knowledge of the consequences. I take full responsibility and request immediate arrest. The detective who took her statement, a 28-year veteran named Rodriguez, had dealt with thousands of confessions. But he'd never encountered anything like this. No emotion. No justification. Just a methodical description of how she deliberately made surgical decisions that would result in a patient's death. Why? Rodriguez had asked. Why would someone with your reputation, your skill, your career, why would you do this? Claire had looked at him with those cold eyes and said something that would haunt Rodriguez for years. Because some debts can only be paid in very specific ways, detective. And some people need to understand that there are consequences that exist outside normal justice systems. The investigation that followed revealed that the patient who died was a 14-year-old girl named Jessica Ramos. Daughter of Lorena Ramos, currently serving 12 years at Ironwood for charges related to drug trafficking and conspiracy to commit murder. The connection wasn't immediately obvious. Claire Meadows and Lorena Ramos had no documented relationship. No shared history. No apparent motive for such an extreme act. But when detectives dug deeper, they found it. A thread so thin and so devastating that it explained everything. 7 years earlier, Claire's daughter Emma, a bright, beautiful 19-year-old pre-med student, had been killed in what was ruled a drug-related shooting. Wrong place, wrong time. Caught in crossfire during a deal gone bad. The shooters were never identified. The case went cold within 6 months. Claire had spent those 7 years investigating privately, following leads that law enforcement had abandoned, building a case that no one else cared about. And eventually, she discovered the truth. Lorena Ramos had ordered the hit that killed Emma. Not because Emma was a target, but because she'd witnessed a transaction and Lorena couldn't take the risk of loose ends. Emma Meadows had been murdered to cover up a drug deal worth $40,000. Her life had been worth less than a used car to the woman who ordered her execution. But Lorena Ramos was untouchable. Already in prison. Already serving her sentence. Protected by institutional rules and prison politics that made her safe from conventional revenge. So Claire had done something that no one expected. She'd used her access and reputation to get assigned to the prison medical rotation. And when Lorena's daughter Jessica came in for emergency appendicitis surgery that required transfer to an outside hospital where Claire worked, she'd made decisions during that surgery that ensured the girl would never leave the operating table. It had been perfect. Undetectable without confession. The kind of medical decision that could be explained as complications or unfortunate outcomes that sometimes happen even with the best surgeons. But Claire didn't want it to be undetectable. She wanted Lorena Ramos to know exactly what had happened and why. She wanted her to live with the knowledge that her daughter had been killed by the mother of the girl she'd murdered. She wanted to deliver a message that could only be delivered from inside the same walls where Lorena lived. So Claire Meadows had confessed. Been arrested. Been convicted. Been sentenced to 20 years in Ironwood Women's Correctional Facility. And now she was walking into Cell Block C, where Lorena Ramos had spent the last 12 years building power through fear and strategic violence. The hunt was about to begin. Cell Block C at Ironwood housed 240 women across 3 tiers. It was a self-contained ecosystem with its own hierarchies, rules, and power structures that existed in the spaces between official regulations. The guards maintained order through a combination of authority and calculated ignorance. They enforced the big rules while allowing smaller transgressions that helped keep the population stable. Claire was assigned to Cell 2 to 47, upper tier, which gave her a clear view of the common area below. Her cellmate was a woman named Deshawn Brooks, serving 6 years for assault, who took one look at Claire's gray hair and gentle demeanor and apparently decided she'd landed the easiest roommate in the facility. "You don't look like you belong here," Deshawn said as Claire unpacked her meager belongings with methodical precision. "None of us belong here," Claire replied softly. "But here we are nonetheless." "What did they get you for?" "I killed a child during surgery. Deliberately." Deshawn's expression shifted from friendly curiosity to wary distance. "Jesus. That's heavy." "Yes," Claire agreed. "It is." Word spread through Cell Block C within hours. The child killer doctor. The woman who'd used her medical skills to murder a 14-year-old girl. By dinner time, Claire could feel the weight of 240 sets of eyes tracking her movement through the facility. In prison, there's a hierarchy of crimes. At the bottom, universally despised, are those who harm children. Claire Meadows had just entered at the absolute bottom of that hierarchy. And everyone knew it. Except Claire didn't move like someone at the bottom. She walked through the dining hall with her tray, found an empty table, and ate her meal with the same calm deliberation she'd shown since arrival. When other inmates stared, she met their eyes without aggression or fear. Just acknowledgement. Eye contact that said, "I see you. I'm not afraid of you. And we both know why I'm here." Lorena Ramos watched from her usual table, surrounded by her crew, 4 women who'd spent years earning her trust through violence and loyalty. Lorena was 47 years old, with elaborate tattoos covering both arms and a scar that ran from her left ear to her collarbone. She controlled drug distribution in Cell Block C, managed gambling operations, and settled disputes through a combination of negotiation and calculated brutality. She'd built a kingdom inside these walls. And she'd learned to live with her daughter's death by convincing herself it was justice. That the surgeon had failed. That it was an accident. That it wasn't connected to her past actions. But now, watching Claire Meadows eat dinner with perfect posture and complete calm, Lorena felt something she hadn't experienced in 12 years. Fear. Because the confession had been public. The details had been in every news article. And Lorena knew, everyone in Cell Block C knew, exactly why Dr. Claire Meadows had killed Jessica Ramos. "We need to handle this," said Maria Torres, Lorena's second-in-command. "She's here for you. Everyone knows it." "Let her make the first move," Lorena replied. But her voice carried an uncertainty that her crew had never heard before. The first move came during morning recreation in the yard. Claire was walking the perimeter, alone, as she'd been since arrival, when she was intercepted by 3 of Lorena's people. They formed a loose triangle around her, blocking her path without making it obvious enough to attract guard attention. "You got a lot of nerve coming into our house," said Carmen Diaz, a woman serving 15 years for armed robbery. "You know who you fucked with when you killed that girl?" Claire stopped walking, looked at each woman in turn, then spoke with the same soft voice she'd used since arrival. "Jessica Ramos died because her mother murdered my daughter Emma 7 years ago. I came here to make sure Lorena understands that some debts must be paid. That's all." "That's all?" Carmen stepped closer. "You think you can just walk in here and—" "Yes," Claire interrupted. Her voice remained soft, but something in her tone made all three women take an involuntary step backward. "I think I can do exactly what I came here to do. Because Lorena Ramos took something irreplaceable from me. And I have taken something irreplaceable from her. Now she gets to live with that knowledge every single day for the rest of her sentence. Just like I've lived with Emma's death for 7 years." "You're gonna die in here," Maria said. "You know that, right?" "Perhaps," Claire replied. "But that won't change what I've already accomplished. Jessica is still dead. Lorena still has to live with that. And threatening me won't undo any of it." She walked past them, leaving the three women standing in confused silence. They'd been prepared for pleading or aggression or fear. They hadn't been prepared for acceptance. For someone who'd already calculated all possible outcomes and found them acceptable. That evening, Lorena finally approached Claire directly. It happened in the library, one of the few places where inmates could have semi-private conversations without constant observation. Claire was reading a medical journal when Lorena sat down across from her. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. They just stared at each other across the table. Predator and prey. Mother and mother. Killer and killer. "You murdered my daughter," Lorena said finally. "Yes," Claire replied. "Just as you murdered mine. Emma Meadows was an accident. Wrong place, wrong time." "No." Claire's voice remained soft, but her eyes were absolutely cold. "Emma was murdered because you ordered it. Because she witnessed a transaction and you couldn't afford loose ends. My daughter was killed to protect a $40,000 drug deal. Her life was worth less to you than a mid-range sedan." Lorena's jaw tightened. "How did you?" "I'm a surgeon, Ms. Ramos. I'm trained to examine complex systems and identify the exact point where something went wrong. I spent 7 years investigating Emma's death. Following financial records. Tracking connections. Building a case that law enforcement abandoned within 6 months. And I discovered that you ordered the hit from inside these walls using the same networks you still control. So you killed my baby as revenge." "No," Claire said, and her voice dropped even lower. "I killed Jessica as balance. As justice. As the only way to ensure you understood that actions have consequences even when legal systems fail to provide them. You took my daughter. I took yours. Now we're even." "Even?" Lorena's voice rose slightly. Several other inmates glanced their direction. "You think killing my Jessica makes us even?" "I think," Claire replied with devastating calm, "that you now know exactly how it feels to have someone you love taken from you for no good reason. To have their future erased because someone else decided their life didn't matter. To wake up every morning with the knowledge that they are gone and nothing will ever bring them back. Yes, Ms. Ramos. I think we're even." Lorena stood up slowly. "You're dead. You understand that? You're fucking dead." Claire met her eyes without flinching. "Probably. But it won't change anything. Jessica is still gone. Emma is still gone. And you have to live with that equation for the rest of your life. Just like I do." As Lorena walked away, Claire returned to her medical journal. But she knew the real game was just beginning. Because what she told Lorena was only half the truth. Yes, Claire had come to Ironwood to deliver a message about balance and consequences. But she'd also come to destroy everything Lorena Ramos had built inside these walls. To dismantle her power structure piece by piece until there was nothing left but the hollow shell of a woman who'd lost everything that mattered. Claire Meadows hadn't just killed Lorena's daughter. She was going to kill Lorena's entire existence. Systematically. Patiently. With the same surgical precision she'd once used to save lives. And it was going to start with the medical unit. Ironwood's medical unit was chronically understaffed. 2 full-time nurses, 1 part-time physician who visited 3 days a week, and a rotating supply of contract medical workers who handled everything from routine checkups to emergency situations. The unit served 800 inmates across 4 cell blocks, and it was overwhelmed on its best days. Which meant they needed help. Desperately. Claire approached Nurse Patricia Howard during her 3rd day at Ironwood. Patricia was a 23-year veteran who'd seen everything and developed the kind of cynical pragmatism that comes from years of working in impossible conditions. "Nurse Howard," Claire said quietly, "I'm Dr. Claire Meadows. I'm aware of my status here. I'm aware of what I did and why I'm incarcerated. But I'm also aware that this facility is critically understaffed in medical services. I'd like to volunteer my expertise if that's permitted." Patricia studied her carefully. "You killed a kid during surgery." "Yes, I did. Deliberately. As revenge for my daughter's murder. I confessed, was convicted, and I'm serving my sentence. But that doesn't change the fact that I spent 15 years as a pediatric surgeon with an exemplary record. I have skills that could benefit the inmates here. If you'll allow it." "Why would you want to help people here?" Claire's expression didn't change. "Because I'm going to be here for 20 years. Because I'd rather be useful than waste that time. And because despite what I did to Jessica Ramos, I still believe in medical ethics. What I did was outside those ethics, it was personal justice. But moving forward, I'd like to practice medicine the way I was trained to practice it." Patricia made a decision that would change everything that followed. "I'll submit a request to the warden. No promises. But we do need help." The approval came within a week. Dr. Claire Meadows was authorized to work in the medical unit under supervision, handling non-emergency cases, routine checkups, and basic medical consultations. She couldn't perform surgery. She couldn't prescribe certain medications. But she could diagnose, advise, and treat the kinds of everyday medical issues that overwhelmed the facility's limited resources. And that access gave Claire something invaluable: information. Within 2 weeks, Claire had treated over 60 inmates. Routine things mostly. Infections. Minor injuries. Chronic conditions that required monitoring. But each consultation gave her insight into the social networks of Cell Block C. Who was connected to whom? Who had influence? Who was vulnerable? Most importantly, she began to understand Lorena's operation from the inside. The drug distribution network relied on inmates who had medical conditions requiring regular medication. Pills were diverted through careful manipulation of prescriptions and inventory. Claire could see the patterns in the medical records: inmates who received slightly more medication than they needed, dosages that were adjusted without clear medical justification, transfer requests that coincided with drug shipments from outside. Lorena had corrupted the medical system to serve her business interests. And Claire was now positioned right at the center of that corrupted system. But she didn't move immediately. Didn't disrupt anything. Just observed. Documented mentally. Built a comprehensive understanding of how everything worked. Because Claire Meadows understood something that most people never grasped about complex systems. You don't destroy them through force. You destroy them by identifying the single critical point where everything depends on perfect functioning, and then you introduce a tiny, undetectable error that cascades into total failure. The opportunity came when Maria Torres, Lorena's second-in-command, came to the medical unit with symptoms of a urinary tract infection. It was routine. Easily treatable with antibiotics. The kind of case that any competent medical professional could handle in minutes. Claire examined her, confirmed the diagnosis, and wrote a prescription for antibiotics. Standard protocol. Except the specific antibiotic Claire prescribed was one that Maria was mildly allergic to. Information buried deep in Maria's medical history from a decade earlier. Not deathly allergic. Just enough to cause uncomfortable side effects. Nausea. Dizziness. Symptoms that would make Maria miss several days of work in the facility's kitchen, where she managed Lorena's drug distribution network. 3 days later, while Maria was incapacitated, a major drug shipment arrived at Ironwood through the usual channels. But without Maria to coordinate distribution, the drugs sat in their hiding place in the kitchen storage area for 6 hours longer than planned. Long enough for Officer Sarah Chen, who'd been suspicious of the kitchen operation for months, to conduct a random inspection that discovered 400 pills hidden in a flour container. The bust was catastrophic for Lorena's operation. 3 inmates were caught with direct evidence. The entire kitchen staff was placed under investigation. And most importantly, The smuggling route that had worked flawlessly for 8 years was suddenly compromised and useless. Lorena knew it wasn't coincidence. She called a meeting in the yard with her remaining crew. "Someone fucked us," she said flatly. "This wasn't bad luck. This was sabotage." Maria was sick, Carmen pointed out. She couldn't have prevented. "Maria got sick from antibiotics prescribed by our friendly neighborhood child killer doctor," Lorena interrupted. "Who happens to have access to everyone's medical records? Who happens to know exactly what medications people are allergic to? Who happens to be the only person in this facility with both the knowledge and the motivation to fuck with my operation?" "You think Dr. Meadows deliberately?" "I think she's smarter than any of us gave her credit for," Lorena said. "I think she didn't come here just to deliver a message about balance. I think she came here to destroy me from the inside. Using the one thing none of us anticipated, her medical expertise." "So what do we do?" Lorena was quiet for a long moment, staring across the yard to where Claire was walking the perimeter with her usual calm deliberation. "We do what we should have done the moment she arrived. We eliminate the threat." The attack was planned for Saturday morning during showers, the same location where many prison assaults happened due to poor camera coverage and the noise that masked sounds of violence. 3 of Lorena's people were assigned to the hit. Instructions were clear: make it look like an accident. Wet floors. A tragic fall. Head trauma. No obvious murder that would trigger investigation. But when Saturday morning came, Claire didn't go to the showers at her usual time. She went an hour earlier, when the facility was less crowded and the 3 assigned attackers weren't in position. When they finally found her in her cell later that morning, she was calmly reading a medical textbook. One of the women, a lifer named Angela who'd been in Ironwood for 19 years, asked how she'd known. Claire looked up from her book. "I'm a surgeon. I notice patterns. I saw the way 3 specific inmates altered their morning routines to match my shower schedule. I saw the way Lorena's crew has been positioned differently over the past week. I understand human behavior well enough to recognize when violence is being planned." "So what, you just gonna keep dodging us forever?" "No," Claire replied. "I'm going to keep dismantling Lorena's operation until there's nothing left for her to protect. And every time she sends people after me, I'm going to see it coming. Because that's what surgeons do. We anticipate complications before they become critical." Angela reported back to Lorena, who was beginning to understand the depth of the problem she faced. Claire Meadows wasn't just another inmate. She was someone who operated on an entirely different level of strategic thinking. Someone who'd spent 15 years making life-or-death decisions in high-pressure situations. Someone who could read patterns and anticipate moves before they happened. "We're doing this wrong," Lorena told her crew that evening. "We're treating her like a normal threat. She's not. She's something else." "Then what do? We go around her. We don't target her directly. We target what she cares about." But that approach revealed another problem. Claire Meadows didn't seem to care about anything except her mission. She had no friends. No allies. No possessions that mattered. She'd already lost the one thing she loved most, her daughter, and she'd already extracted her revenge for that loss. She was invulnerable because she'd already sacrificed everything that could be used against her. Over the following weeks, Claire continued her systematic dismantling of Lorena's operation. It was never obvious. Never direct. Just tiny interventions that cascaded into larger failures. A word to Officer Chen about unusual activity in the laundry room led to the discovery of a secondary contraband route. A medical diagnosis that required an inmate to be transferred to a different cell block removed one of Lorena's most trusted couriers. A recommendation that certain medications be more carefully monitored eliminated the pill diversion scheme that funded half of Lorena's operations. Each intervention was plausibly innocent. Just a doctor doing her job. Just medical recommendations based on legitimate concerns. Nothing that could be traced back to deliberate sabotage. But the cumulative effect was devastating. Within 2 months, Lorena's drug operation was running at 30% capacity. Her crew was fractured by suspicion and investigation. Her reputation was suffering as other inmates questioned whether she could still protect her interests. And through it all, Claire Meadows continued her quiet routine. Reading. Walking. Working in the medical unit. Never celebrating. Never gloating. Just existing with the same calm deliberation that had characterized her arrival. Until the night everything changed. It happened during evening count, 3 months after Claire's arrival. Officer Chen was conducting the routine cell check when she found Deshaun Brooks unconscious on the floor of cell 2 to 47. Initial assessment suggested a drug overdose, not uncommon in correctional facilities. But Claire, who was present when medical personnel arrived, immediately recognized something was wrong. "This isn't an overdose," she said quietly to the emergency nurse. "Look at her pupils. Check her breathing pattern. This is poisoning. Probably something in her food or water within the last 6 hours." The nurse verified Claire's assessment. Deshaun was transported to the hospital where she survived but spent 3 days in intensive care. The investigation that followed discovered that someone had contaminated her dinner with a combination of medications that would have appeared to be an accidental overdose. But Claire knew exactly what had happened. Lorena had finally found a way to hurt her, by targeting her cellmate. The message was clear: if we can't get to you directly, we'll destroy everyone around you. For the first time since arriving at Ironwood, Claire's calm exterior cracked. She requested an emergency meeting with Warden Patricia Morrison, a no-nonsense administrator who'd been running Ironwood for 12 years. "Warden," Claire began, her voice still controlled but carrying an edge of something darker, "I need to report that there's a systematic campaign of violence being orchestrated by Lorena Ramos and her associates. They attempted to poison my cellmate. They've been planning multiple assaults against me. And they're going to continue until either I'm dead or they are." Morrison studied her carefully. "Dr. Meadows, you killed that woman's daughter. What exactly did you expect would happen when you came here?" "I expected her to try to kill me," Claire replied. "What I didn't expect was for this facility to allow a situation where inmates can orchestrate attempted murders with apparent impunity. Deshaun Brooks is innocent. She had nothing to do with anything between me and Lorena. Poisoning her was an act of terrorism designed to create fear and demonstrate power. What do you want me to do about it?" Claire leaned forward slightly. "I want you to let me finish what I came here to do. Give me access to complete medical records for the past 5 years. Give me permission to conduct a full audit of medication distribution. And give me protection from retaliation while I dismantle the corruption that's been poisoning this facility long before I arrived." "You're asking me to weaponize you against Lorena Ramos. I'm asking you to let me do what I'm uniquely qualified to do. Expose the systematic corruption that's allowed Lorena to run a drug operation inside these walls for over a decade. I can prove it. But I need access to records and I need protection while I work." Morrison was silent for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "Why should I trust you? You're a convicted murderer who killed a child in your care." "Because what I did to Jessica Ramos was personal justice outside the law. What I'm offering you is evidence-based exposure of institutional corruption. One doesn't invalidate the other. I'm a monster, Warden. I accept that. But monsters can still be useful when pointed at bigger problems." Morrison made a decision that would define her career. "You have 2 weeks. Full access to medical records. Protection detailed during your investigation. But if you're lying to me, if this is some elaborate scheme, I'll make sure you spend the rest of your sentence in administrative segregation. Understood?" "Understood." What Claire discovered over the next 2 weeks was worse than anyone had suspected. Lorena's operation wasn't just about drugs. It was about systematic exploitation of the entire medical system at Ironwood. Medications were being diverted not just for sale but for coercion. Inmates who needed specific drugs were forced to pay tribute or provide services to Lorena's organization. Medical appointments were being manipulated to create opportunities for contraband exchange. Even some medical staff were complicit, accepting payments to falsify records or look the other way during inspections. Claire documented everything. Cross-referenced prescriptions with actual medical needs. Identified patterns of medication requests that had no legitimate purpose. Built a comprehensive case that showed how deeply corrupted the system had become. But she also discovered something else. Something that would change the nature of her revenge entirely. In the medical records from 7 years ago, she found evidence that Lorena Ramos had received treatment for a serious condition while incarcerated. A condition that required ongoing medication to manage. A condition that, if left untreated, would be fatal within months. And the medication Lorena needed was one of the drugs being diverted through her own operation. Claire sat in the medical unit late one night, staring at this information, and made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She didn't report the medication diversion immediately. Instead, she made subtle changes to the prescription protocols. Adjustments that would slowly reduce the amount of medication Lorena received. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough to ensure that Lorena's condition would gradually worsen over time. It was the same thing she'd done to Jessica Ramos. Using medical expertise to cause death through seemingly legitimate decisions. Except this time, it would be slower, more painful, and completely undetectable unless someone was specifically looking for it. Claire had come to Ironwood to deliver a message about balance and justice. But she'd discovered something about herself in the process. She'd discovered that the capacity for calculated violence that had allowed her to kill Jessica wasn't a one-time thing. It was part of who she was now. She was no longer the humanitarian surgeon who saved children's lives. She was something else. Something darker. Something that could look at medical records and see opportunities for revenge that most people couldn't imagine. 3 weeks later, Lorena collapsed in the yard during recreation time. She was rushed to the hospital where doctors struggled to stabilize her condition. The diagnosis was complications from her existing medical condition. Apparently her medication regimen hadn't been effective. But when specialists reviewed her treatment history, they found something strange. The dosages she'd been receiving were slightly lower than what her condition required. Not dramatically lower. Just enough to be ineffective over time. The investigation into this discrepancy led nowhere. Medical records showed appropriate prescriptions. The pharmacy confirmed proper dispensing. Everything looked correct on paper. Except Claire Meadows had been the primary physician adjusting medication protocols for the past 3 months. And while no one could prove deliberate malpractice, the pattern was suspicious enough that her medical privileges were immediately revoked pending review. By the time Lorena was released from the hospital and returned to Ironwood, she was a shadow of her former self. The medical episode had weakened her significantly. Her crew had fractured during her absence. And the investigation into medication diversion had exposed so much of her operation that there was nothing left to control. She was still alive. But everything she'd built was gone. Her power. Her reputation. Her organization. All of it dismantled by a quiet woman who used medical records as weapons more effectively than most people used violence. The confrontation happened in the library, just like their first meeting. Lorena, looking gaunt and diminished, sat across from Claire with eyes that had lost their fire. "You did this," Lorena said. Not a question. A statement. "Yes," Claire replied. "Just as you destroyed my daughter." Jessica was. "Balance," Claire interrupted. "Justice. Revenge. Call it whatever you want. You took my daughter. I took yours. You built power through corruption and violence. I took that power away. Now you get to live with all of it. Just like I've lived with Emma's death for 7 years. You're going to kill me," Lorena said. "With your medical manipulations. You're doing to me what you did to Jessica." Claire was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who had crossed too many lines to ever find their way back. "No," she said. "I'm not going to kill you, Lorena. That would be mercy. Instead, I'm going to let you live. Let you spend the next 8 years of your sentence as just another inmate with no power, no protection, no organization. Let you wake up every morning knowing that the woman who destroyed everything you built is still here, still walking these corridors, still existing in the same space while you've been reduced to nothing." "You're a monster," Lorena whispered. "Yes," Claire agreed. "I am. I became one the day I walked into that police station and confessed to killing your daughter. I became one the day I decided that legal justice wasn't enough. And I became one every day after that when I chose revenge over redemption." She stood up to leave, then paused. "The difference between us, Lorena, is that I accept what I am. I don't pretend my actions are justified by circumstances or necessity. I killed Jessica deliberately. I destroyed your operation deliberately. I am exactly the monster everyone thinks I am. And I'm going to spend the next 20 years living with that knowledge. Why are you telling me this?" Claire looked at her with those cold eyes. "Because I want you to understand. I want you to spend the rest of your sentence knowing that the woman who destroyed you isn't some hero seeking justice. She's just another broken person who learned to weaponize her pain in ways most people can't imagine. We're the same, you and I. We both killed for reasons that made sense to us at the time. The difference is I'm not pretending otherwise." As Claire walked away, Lorena sat alone at the library table and finally understood the full scope of what had been done to her. She hadn't just lost her daughter. She hadn't just lost her power. She'd been shown that she and the woman she'd tried to destroy were fundamentally identical. Both mothers who'd lost children. Both criminals who'd used their skills to cause harm. Both monsters wearing human faces. And that understanding was worse than any physical punishment could have been. Over the following months, Claire returned to her quiet routine. She was no longer allowed to work in the medical unit, but she found other ways to be useful. She taught literacy classes. She volunteered in the library. She helped other inmates write letters to their families. She became, in many ways, the kind woman she'd appeared to be on the day of her arrival. Gentle. Educated. Helpful. Someone who seemed incapable of the violence she'd committed. But everyone in Ironwood knew the truth. They'd seen what Dr. Claire Meadows was capable of when properly motivated. They'd watched her dismantle a drug empire using nothing but medical knowledge and strategic patience. They understood that beneath the gentle exterior was something far more dangerous than physical strength or aggressive behavior. Officer Chen pulled her aside one afternoon during yard time. "Dr. Meadows, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest." "I'll try," Claire replied. "Did you deliberately manipulate Lorena's medication to cause her medical episode?" Claire met her eyes directly. "If I did, could you prove it?" "No. The records are clean. Everything looks legitimate. But the timing is suspicious. The dosage adjustments align perfectly with your access to her medical files." "Then I suppose it doesn't matter whether I did or didn't. The outcome is the same. Lorena's operation is dismantled. The medication diversion scheme is exposed. And this facility is safer because of it." "That's not an answer, Dr. Meadows." Claire smiled slightly. It wasn't a happy expression. "Officer Chen, I came here to deliver a message about consequences. To show Lorena Ramos that destroying my family would result in the destruction of everything she valued. Whether I used medical manipulation to achieve that goal is less important than the fact that the goal was achieved. Justice was served. Not legal justice. But something more fundamental." "You're admitting to." "I'm not admitting to anything," Claire interrupted gently. "I'm simply stating that outcomes matter more than methods sometimes. And the outcome here is that a corrupt, violent drug operation has been eliminated from this facility. Isn't that what we all want?" Chen studied her for a long moment. "You scare the hell out of me, Dr. Meadows." "Good," Claire replied. "Fear indicates awareness. Awareness indicates you understand exactly what I am. And what I'm capable of when circumstances require it." The conversation ended there, but Chen would spend years thinking about it. About the nature of justice. About the difference between legal punishment and actual accountability. About whether someone like Claire Meadows was worse than the criminals she fought against or whether she was simply more honest about the darkness that exists in everyone. Dr. Claire Meadows was released from Ironwood Women's Correctional Facility after serving 17 years of her 20-year sentence. She'd earned early release through exemplary behavior, educational programs, and volunteer work that had made her one of the most model inmates in the facility's history. The day she walked out, Officer Chen was there to process her release. "Got plans, Dr. Meadows?" "Quiet ones," Claire replied. "Small town. Maybe volunteering at a clinic for underserved populations. Finding ways to use my skills that don't involve revenge or violence." "You think you can do that? After everything?" Claire was quiet for a moment. "I think I have to try. I've spent 17 years living with what I did to Jessica Ramos. With the knowledge that I became exactly the kind of monster I claimed to be fighting against. If I don't at least attempt redemption, then all of it, the imprisonment, the loss, the transformation, was for nothing." "Lorena died last year," Chen said quietly. "Medical complications. Natural causes according to the autopsy." Claire's expression didn't change. "I heard. I sent a prayer to her family." "Did you?" "Officer Chen," Claire interrupted gently, "some questions are better left unasked. Some answers are better left unknown. What matters is that Lorena Ramos is gone. Her drug operation is gone. And this facility is safer because of the changes that came from my investigation. The rest is between me and whatever God might exist. As Claire walked away from Ironwood, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 17 years. Not happiness, that was probably lost forever along with Emma. But something like acceptance. She'd achieved what she set out to do. Lorena had paid for Emma's death. And Claire had paid for Jessica's death. The scales were balanced as much as they ever could be. 3 months after her release, Claire opened a small medical clinic in a rural town of 3,000 people. She treated patients for free or minimal cost. She taught health education classes at the local high school. She volunteered at a women's shelter providing medical care to domestic violence survivors. She became, in many ways, the doctor she'd been before Emma's death. Caring. Knowledgeable. Dedicated to helping people. But late at night, when the clinic was closed and she was alone with her thoughts, Claire would sometimes remember the look in Lorena's eyes during their final conversation. The understanding that they were the same. Both mothers. Both killers. Both monsters wearing masks of humanity. And she would wonder if redemption was even possible for someone who'd crossed the lines she'd crossed. Who'd used medical expertise to kill not once but potentially twice. Who'd discovered a capacity for calculated violence that most people couldn't imagine. The answer, Claire suspected, was no. Real redemption probably wasn't possible. But attempting it was the only thing that gave meaning to the 17 years she'd spent in Ironwood. The only thing that made the transformation from humanitarian surgeon to calculating killer to possibly reformed citizen make any kind of sense. She'd entered prison to destroy the woman who'd taken her daughter. And she'd succeeded. But in the process, she'd destroyed herself too. The Dr. Claire Meadows who had saved hundreds of children's lives was gone. Replaced by something harder. Darker. More willing to make impossible choices when circumstances demanded it. And that person, that monster wearing the face of a kind woman, would spend the rest of her life trying to balance the mathematical equation of her existence. One murdered daughter. One murdered teenager. One destroyed drug empire. 17 years of imprisonment. And a lifetime of attempting to rebuild something meaningful from the ruins of who she used to be. The math would never work out perfectly. The scales would never truly balance. But trying was all she had left. And so Claire Meadows tried. Every single day. For the rest of her life. The story of what happened at Ironwood Women's Correctional Facility became legend within the prison system. Guards told new recruits about the surgeon who'd systematically dismantled a drug empire using medical records as weapons. Inmates spoke in hushed tones about the quiet woman who'd proven that intelligence and patience could be more dangerous than any physical violence. But the real lesson of Claire Meadows' story wasn't about revenge or justice or the creative application of medical knowledge to achieve desired outcomes. The real lesson was about transformation. About how grief and loss can change people into things they never imagined becoming. About the fine line between justice and vengeance. About the capacity for calculated violence that exists in even the most humanitarian professions. Claire had entered prison as a doctor seeking to balance accounts that legal systems couldn't address. She'd emerged as something else entirely. Not good. Not evil. Just fundamentally changed in ways that could never be undone. And somewhere in a cemetery outside Portland, 2 headstones marked the graves of Emma Meadows and Jessica Ramos. 2 teenage girls who'd been killed by the actions of broken people seeking to settle debts through violence. Their deaths had changed everything. Not just for their mothers. But for everyone who heard the story and had to confront uncomfortable questions about the nature of justice and the price of revenge. Claire Meadows had proven that some debts could be paid. That some accounts could be balanced. That some forms of justice existed outside courtrooms and legal procedures. But she'd also proven that the cost of such justice was the loss of whoever you were before you decided to pursue it. That vengeance, no matter how justified, transformed people into things they might not recognize when they looked in the mirror. And that transformation, once undertaken, could never be completely reversed.